First thing we'll need to do is create the texture map that we want in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, I've generated this pattern, and when repeated will give me a much broader floor surface in Maya, simply by repeating this texture. I'm saving this as a JPEG, and I'm going to go to File, Save As. And if I were to go to my project folder now, inside the project folder itself, there is a subfolder named Source Images. And what we want to do is keep external textures from our Maya project in this folder so that they remain linked to the main scene in the proprietary folder for our project. So you can see I've gone in and I've already saved this as tilefloor.jpg. Now, Maya accepts many different kinds of files, TIFFs, PSDs, Targas, PNGs. All these files can be imported in. They all serve different purposes inside of Maya. So for our purposes, we want a flat floor with no opacity changes, so we're using a JPEG. Once I've saved that texture, I'm going to go into Maya. Now I'm going to select the surface geometry for my floor, which is a polygon, and I'll right-click on it, and I'll choose Assign New Material. And in the New Material dialog window, I would choose what sort of surface I might want here. Now I want it to have a bit of a sheen to it, so I'll choose a standard blend. And then I'm going to scroll on the right here to the blend itself, and I'm going to name it Floor. All right, now it says Floor 1 because I've already had a floor texture in this model, so just to kind of drive home the fact that Maya will not allow you to name two elements the same name. So in this case, it went and generated that one for me, so there'd be no confusion. Now, at this point, we had been only adding color. But if I go down through the color feature here, you'll notice that there is a track with a little slider bar that lets me change the values of whatever exists as far as color goes on that geometry. Now, I'm going to go to the far right-hand side, though, and you'll notice that on the right-hand side of all these different terms inside the texture editor, that there's a checkerboard. And when I click on that checkerboard, it takes me to the Create Render node. From the Create Render node now, I'm going to click on the word File. The icon to the left of the word File is a little mountain range with the sun. I'm going to click on that. My texture editor on the right has changed, and now I see image name, an active text box, and then a yellow folder at the far right-hand side. I'm going to click on the yellow folder, and I'm going to navigate out to my project folder. And from that project folder, I'm going to open up the source images, and I'm going to click on Tile Floor, and I'm going to choose Open. And there's my texture. Now, you may not see your texture initially. If we were to address the number keys that we've been discussing in Maya since we've been using it, we know that 4 will give us wireframe, 5 will give us the color of our geometry based on the color that we chose from the proprietary node. But if I were to hit 6 now, it updates and shows me the textures. All right, so 4 wireframe, 5 grayscale or just color inside of Maya, 6 allows us to preview our textures as well. And again, this is so that the CPU of your computer is not overburdened by textures. It also can be kind of helpful when you're just trying to model. Sometimes textures can be busy and distracting. So I'm going to hit Command S on the keyboard, and now let's proceed. Now I'm going to go to the node again. And the next thing I want to do is access my hypershade. So I'm going to click on the hypershade with my geometry selected. And there's my geometry. Now, In the hypershade window now, we've looked at this when we first introduced color in a very basic way. What I want to do though is I want to get that texture and I want to make it much smaller and repeated. So I'm going to go into my library here where I see my nodes, and there's floor 1. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose Graph Network. Now, once I've done that, down in this window to the right of my node window, you'll see a series of icons. Each of these icons represents something. We want to change the nature of the placed 2D texture, and here's the node that relates to that. So I'm going to select it, and if I wanted to, I could hit F on the keyboard to isolate it. But more importantly, over on the right, I'm going to see those features that I can change now. So a lot of these are self-explanatory. What we really want to address here now is the repeat UV. UV is just the term that is used for the two-dimensional surface that we've got our texture on. So if I were to change both of these to say 4, it will repeat the pattern and distribute it neatly over my surface. And there is my floor. I'm going to hit Command S to save and hit Continue. Now there's one other thing I would do just to make sure that it's what I want. I'm selecting my surface. I'm going to hit W on the keyboard so that I see my selected geometry and the vertices radiating from it, because the next thing I want to confirm, and we'll do this again with the door, is that I want to hold down my space bar and I want to go to UVs and I'm going to choose Planar Mapping, and I want to go to the window for this. I want to go to the feature window. All right, I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to close out my hypershade for a moment, and you'll see planar mapping options. Now, the way this works is that we want to choose the vertice axes that is perpendicular to the surface that the texture is being placed on. So it can be confusing because our texture is on the ZX axis, laying flat. But we have to choose y-axis because that is the perpendicular vertex that will plot our texture on that surface the way we want on the x-axis. So I'm going to click on Y and then I'll hit Apply. Now when I've done that, I also get a virtual tool that allows me to adjust that texture while it is still in this live state. So you'll notice that it's flanked on the sides by these little colored boxes. And if I were to go in and tweak these, I can interactively change the nature of that pattern. I can move it. And then you'll notice in the left-hand corner here as well, there's a red T. If I click on that red T, I get the option not only to scale that texture, but also there's my rotation tool. Now it doesn't make much sense to rotate on a flat surface, but that virtual tool gives you the option to tweak your texture before you commit and go back to your object mode.